It's a real pleasure to be here today. I've heard so much about the brilliant work that you're doing in Berlin and Germany. I feel like this is going to be a little bit of a depressing presentation from the UK, but I would like to just give you a little perspective about the public food situation in the UK and what we're trying to campaign for to make great food available to everybody on the public plate. So I work for Sustain, which is the Alliance for Better Food and Farming, and we represent about 100 non-profit organisations in the UK, and we're all campaigning for healthy, more sustainable and a fairer food system, paying better wages and tackling poverty and climate change. So we have been campaigning on public food for about 20 years. I have, not me personally, but Sustain has been trying to get better food in the public sector for a very long time. And we have had some success. Some things are still quite terrible. So this is going to be a real mixed picture. A very brief history for you. So in the UK, every year we spend about £2 billion on public sector food, and about 20% of people in the UK eat a meal in the public sector each day. The vast majority of that is in schools. We have free school meals for all children for the first 3 years of schooling. That's quite new. It came in about 3 years ago after a lot of campaigning from us. We really believe in free school meals. After the first 3 years, it's free for anybody who is on a low income. And that it was 17%, but it's now just gone up to 20% during COVID. I don't blame COVID for that. I blame the government for people being on lower incomes and more children in poverty. But it's becoming a very significant chunk of the population that are on low enough incomes that they are entitled to free school meals. After that, for people on higher incomes, it's optional, and roughly 60% of children have a school meal. So that includes the ones that get it for free and the ones that choose to have a school meal. The rest bring in food from home. We don't have anybody going home like in other countries, like in France, where people go home for lunch. We don't have that at all. So it's fair to say that school food was absolutely terrible in the early 2000s. And then Mr. Jamie Oliver had a very high profile TV campaign, which was incredibly successful in many ways. It managed to achieve a change in the law. So we now have legal standards for food that can be served in schools. And that includes, you have to have fruit and veg. You can't have too much fried food. And there's a limited amount of salt and sugar and some stuff around nutrition. But really, they're quite basic standards. The monitoring is weak. And it doesn't really talk about all of the benefits that you get from a good food culture and the kind of things that are more interesting and exciting about food, like good behavior, how you make food delicious and appetizing, and how you make children interested in food and how they learn about what is healthy. And so whilst we have sort of minimum standards, there's still a lot missing about how you create a good food culture. The other thing to say is that though those standards are quite basic, monitoring is very weak. So there is a lot of concern that not even those basic standards are being met. And whilst we have those standards, other things are working against schools. Cost cutting, the increased price of ingredients where the government hasn't increased the budget for school meals. And we're seeing privatisation. So where school meals used to be done by councils, more and more private companies are being brought in to run the meals. So they're being run for profit rather than for public interest. We also have schools struggling with budgets, taking out kitchens. So they're being left, rather than cooking food fresh, it's brought in as a kind of cook chill system, which has been more expensive and can be lower quality. So it's not all depressing, I promise. Great public sector food does exist. there are absolutely brilliant caterers doing great food in across the public sector. One great scheme is called Food for Life Served Here. And that is a scheme which is run by the Soil Association, which is an NGO. It's not a government scheme, it's completely separate. And they have an award scheme where they award bronze, silver and gold awards to schools, which is a recognised and celebrated award where they're doing good food. And at a bronze level, you have to have certain minimum standards in place. 75% needs to be freshly prepared. It needs to be relatively locally sourced meat, free-range eggs, no red-rated fish, so sort of minimum sustainability for fish. And then it has to have some seasonal and local produce. The other thing that's really important is that you have to have more of a whole school approach. It's this kind of wraparound system. So it's not just about what's on the plate, but you have to involve pupils and parents in planning meals and in improvements to the school meal environment. You also have to have pupils given the opportunity to visit local farms, and you have to have education around food and health. So it's really creating an environment in the school which values food and promotes children's health and well-being through food. At a silver and gold level, you also have to have a proportion of food that is organic and higher welfare. Now, you'll probably be quite shocked when you hear the proportion. To achieve sort of silver and gold, it's around 10 to 15%. So it's a lot less, you know, than is being achieved in other countries. And I think this has been something for me to learn about how much more ambitious we should be about organic food in the public sector, because really we're doing quite well on some things, but we've got a long way to go around getting organic to be the norm. Lots of work for us to do, perhaps maybe in another 20 years. Now, it's fair to say the Food for Life scheme has had a huge impact. Over 1 million meals per day across the UK are either bronze, silver or gold. The Soil Association has calculated that for each £1 spent in a school meal that is run through the Food for Life scheme, the social return on investment, so the investment in communities and in good food, is £4.41, which is extraordinary return on investment. The annual spend on organic ingredients is £12 million, and the annual spend on fair trade products is over £1 million as well. So it's having a huge impact on the better produce. They've also noticed improved behaviour and performance for students and improved concentration. And this is all achieved on the same budget. So schools don't get extra money for being involved in this scheme. They do it voluntarily. Some have even found that they've saved money because they've been able to reduce waste. They might have fewer options on the menu, but the options are better, the food is better, so they can increase uptake. And schools have been able, because you have this thing where the school meal is optional, if you improve the quality of the meal, you can encourage more people to have the school meal, then you get better economies of scale, and you can actually improve the sort of you can actually reduce your costs because you're serving more meals, you're getting higher income, and that is actually working out well for schools that take up this scheme. Another great project is called Chefs in Schools, and chefs that work in restaurants have this scheme where they adopt a local school. Some chefs also actually go to work longer term in the school kitchen. It's a great thing for some chefs because it offers relatively family-friendly hours and good opportunities. And it emphasises the chef really going into a school and helping to transform the catering. So it's like a kind of learning and adoption scheme. It's brilliant. Again, same budget, but these chefs have been able to transform the school menus and really celebrating school chefs as kind of heroes and people to be celebrated, rather than being seen as like almost a kind of less good chefing job. You know, it's starting to make chef jobs in schools given the same status as a chef job in a restaurant. So it's not just about schools. Of course, schools is the biggest chunk of public catering in the UK, but we also have prisons, care homes, military spending, and hospitals. Now, outside of schools, there aren't nutritional standards, but there are sort of sustainability criteria that that caterers need to meet. They are pretty basic. So you have to serve British meat. You have to have some kind of vegetable in meals, free-range eggs, and about 10% should be from better systems. But there's not, it sort of says it should be organic, but there isn't really a proper definition. And so as part of the campaigning work that Sustain has done, we've found that compliance with those standards, even very basic standards, is only about 50%. And we particularly did a lot of work in hospitals, and we did a report there, and you'll see some of the that gorgeous picture there of hospital food, which was submitted by a patient as part of our hospital meals campaign. So what on earth, what do we want to see? What would we like to see as the vision for better public food in the UK? Well, we really see public food as an opportunity to achieve so much. First of all, we know it can be done because we've got this real difference, right, between the minimum standards that all public sector caterers need to meet and what can be achieved through schemes like Food for Life on the same budget, just with a bit of ambition and a little bit of investment of time and chefs being given the opportunity to do well. Public sector food we really see as the opportunity to tackle the climate and nature emergency. We're struggling at the moment in the UK to get our politicians to take climate change and food seriously. And we all know why that is, right? Because we've got a leadership that doesn't really believe in leadership. And you know, we're really struggling to get any traction. And we, you know, when Boris Johnson talks about diets, he says, we're not going to tell people what to eat. So really removing their responsibility for anything to do with people's food and eating good diets. But we do see the public sector food as an opportunity to show leadership and for the government to really make a difference with public money. We also have a real problem with rising poverty in the UK. And it's becoming increasingly the case that the majority, for an increasing number of children, the majority of their nutrition comes from their school meal. 25% of families in the UK now live are experiencing food poverty. And so we know that we really need to campaign hard for good food in the public sector. It's more than just a nice to have. It's become crucially, you know, hungry child can't learn. It's increasingly important that we make public sector food good. We also want to support local farmers and food systems because they're finding it increasingly difficult to make a living, especially with Brexit. Of course, again, not all their fault, but a crisis of leadership. We really do need good leadership from national government, and we are really campaigning hard to make that happen at Sustain. We want to see the standards in law, and we want to see those standards improved. But we also want to see more power and more support and more opportunities for local caterers, because we know that we're seeing, despite lack of leadership, we're really seeing great things at a local level. So we want local councils and local chefs to have more power, more opportunity, and more money, essentially. And finally, we really want to see free school meals for all pupils. So as I said, at the moment, about 20% of children get a free school meal. But we have data to show that about 40% of children are missing out on their free school meals, either because they don't fill in the forms properly, or they're not eligible because they have refugee status, or because they just don't fit the criteria. So if that was just the case for all pupils, then we wouldn't have that problem of children missing out on the free school meals when they deserve to have a good meal. So hopefully that's given you an overview of what we really would like to see and where we are now. And hopefully it's just fostered a few questions in your mind, which I'd be happy to answer later. So I'll finish there. I'll stop sharing my screen. Thank you so much, and I hope that's been interesting.